So I'm just going to jump right in. That went one too far. Okay. So all the times when I talk about writing with groups, one of the first slides I always start with is some version of this slide. So I talk about this with faculty and undergrads and graduate students and teachers of writing. And I like to use it because I think that it is really nice to acknowledge at the beginning of any writing project that these things are true all the time. We all have things we might like. Some people have things they like to write, but everybody has something they don't want to write. And sometimes it's unexpected. So sometimes we might think we want to write something and then it turns out we don't like the experience of doing it, or we get super frustrated. We feel maybe surprised. I usually go into projects like this, but then rotate around to these various other experiences of writing at some point in the process. And I just think it's really nice to acknowledge at the beginning of any kind of writing that all of these things exist and that no single one of them is an indicator that you aren't supposed to be doing the writing. So every now and then someone will be like, but I'm super bored, or I'm really angry, or I'm just feeling so sad from working on this. And it can be easy to make that let you feel that maybe that means you shouldn't be working on the project. But what we know from research is that when we start using our brains in ways that it hasn't really been used, sometimes it doesn't know what to do. So it just starts doing all kinds of these things. And so it's nice to acknowledge that if you're feeling really frustrated or bored or even, super powerful, but none of those things actually indicate your capacity to work on the project or even really how good the project is. If you're somebody who's like excited and powerful, that's also awesome, but it also doesn't mean you don't need feedback on your paper, because you can feel like the queen of the world and also have a lot of typos and spelling errors. And so this is nice to just know at the beginning. And my background is in educational psychology and specifically about the psychology of writing. And so I personally like to put a number of these things in because I think it can be sort of barriers when we're trying to work on any kind of writing project, just what our minds are doing, because our minds are trying to write, but they also choose to do other things we would like them to not do. Okay, so tonight in the next 45 minutes, hour or so, we're going to cover a couple of things. We're going to talk about how to write scholarship essays in a number of different ways. We're going to talk about who you're writing to as an audience, how to break down the prompts, because all the essays have different kind of prompts or questions they want you to answer, how to understand what word count means, and maybe how that can help you plan your writing. So we're going to talk about something called the STAR method, which I think is amazing for figuring out how to write about personal experiences, because it can be kind of strange to write about yourself. Specific different kinds of scholarship situations, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the Writing and Public Speaking Center and how to make an appointment with some of the tutors we have there. And then we'll have time for questions also. Okay. So at the outset, the first question is really, why are we writing them? Like, why do we have to do this thing? So sometimes when we see a scholarship out there, it looks like a great opportunity. And it is definitely easy to have a moment where you're like, but I would like to just submit my grades. I would not like to write an essay. Thank you very much. And so I think this is a great question to start with. Like, why do we have to do it? Because it feels like a separate assignment. And it is a separate assignment. And I think it's nice to look at it as an opportunity, because our grades just really don't tell the whole story. They don't say something like, I got these grades even though I worked 2 part-time jobs. They don't say, I got these grades even though I had a chronic illness or a parent had a chronic illness. They don't get to tell you the stories. You just see the product of what you have on your resume or what you have on your GPA. So this is a place to really introduce yourself and say, here's something else that's important about me. Here's something else I want you to know. So it's an opportunity to tell a story. It also does allow you to showcase your writing and reasoning skills. For a lot of people, that can also be really, really helpful, because a lot of other kinds of writings are timed writing. And this is a piece of writing that you have time to work on it and get some feedback and really use it as a way to demonstrate something that you can, practice at and get a little help and improve. So it's a good way to show off some writing and thinking skills. And it's also a tool for you to get the resources you need. So it's nice to think of it as an opportunity and as a tool instead of as an assignment. Because a lot of times assignments are just leading to grades, and you won't ever get a grade on this. You might not ever have anybody tell you whether or not the essay was strong. I mean, if you come to the Writing Center, we'll give you a lot of feedback. But that isn't, you're writing it for a different reason than you are for an assignment. So it can be nice to think, this is an opportunity I have, this is a tool I have, instead of this is another assignment that I have to do, because it's not really for school, it's for your future. It's a little bit different. Okay, so because of that, it can also feel a little bit different. So if it's helpful for you to think about it as a school assignment and it keeps it in this narrow compartment, then you should absolutely do that. If you're like, nope, I'm doing this for a class, actually, you might be doing it for a class. I know there are some teachers that leave space for writing scholarship essays and things in the classroom. That's awesome. You should take any chance you get to do that. That being said, sometimes these scholarship essays they land a little bit differently with us as writers for a couple of reasons. One, sometimes it makes us feel shy. We don't really want to write about ourselves. And a lot of these essays ask us to write about ourselves. They want us to tell a story. They want us to be in the center. And a lot of us have spent a lot of time not being that. We have not wanted to tell a story about ourselves. We have not really wanted to talk about our families or our past or our work or whatever. We just haven't really wanted to do that. And so now it's really asking us to. So it can make us feel a little bit shy. The useful thing to know about that is that you do have a very, very limited audience for these essays. The people reading them you may or may not ever even meet. They're often scholarship committees, maybe your teacher, maybe a tutor, but they feel really exposing, but they aren't essays that you write for an actual broad audience. The other thing I say, and then I'll get into more the nitty gritty of understanding the kinds of essays, but the other thing it's useful to know sometimes is that with any project that feels new, any kind of writing project, when we have to go in and start exploring our own experiences or thinking about our own future, it can get really jumbled in there. Like it makes us think about a lot of things that maybe we weren't planning to think about. It makes us ask a lot of questions that we didn't maybe really want to ask. We don't really want to address those questions. It can be hard to answer questions like, where do you see yourself in the future? It's a really hard question to answer. And we feel like we're committing to something. And so this is all to say, this stuff can come up and it isn't just you. It's normal. And but these experiences, these two slides can make us feel like maybe we aren't the right person to write this essay. But you are absolutely the right person to write these essays. This is how most people feel working with these genres. As somebody who works with someone weekly and sometimes daily on these kinds of essays, nobody likes them and nobody writes enough of them to get amazing at it. So we're all sort of beginners whenever we work on them. Okay, but there are a lot of things that we can say that can kind of help calm our brains down, like kind of give us a plan. So that's what I really want to get into, is to say some things that will give you some concrete stuff to think about. One is that whenever you're working on these essays, you're writing to someone who's going to read it. You're going to have an audience of a little committee or a larger committee or just a handful of people, right? But they're going to listen intently to what you put in here. They want to know what you have to say. So those audiences can be a number of things. They can be an institution, it can be like an organization that has a scholarship. It can be a specific program or specific scholarship, or it can be an individual person or individual people. Sometimes you might have names, like it might list some names. Often this sort of information is available to you if you are looking into where the scholarship is posted, or if you start looking at, if you kind of Google search that scholarship and start seeing other people who maybe have gotten it, what else can you find out about it? It can help to give you an idea about how large a group you're writing to. Not because you're going to try to appeal to them, but it's just nice to have something in mind. If it is, if this is too vague, sometimes it can be helpful in the intermediate to just think of like a teacher you respect but you don't know very well. So if you can think of someone at your school, maybe you had that teacher, but you didn't know them very well, but you respected them and you want them to know something about yourself. It's nice sometimes to imagine a person you know, because it just helps us feel a little bit more relaxed. We are less worried about being judged. But our actual audience is an outside reader, someone who doesn't actually know us at all. Often those readers are made up of, they're in committees. So there will be groups of people or groups of volunteers, or like at the university scholarship committee is a whole bunch of faculty and staff that read through these essays. So a whole selection of people. It's different in all kinds of different circumstances, but we can say that they're always looking for a couple of particular things. Maybe it is leadership or excellence in a given field. Can you show that? Or is there something you're really passionate about, or that you've actually learned a lot about already? They are looking to gain an understanding of your values and your goals. They want to be able to have a sense of that from reading your work. Sometimes they're maybe looking for change over time. Sometimes the prompts are saying, what's the thing that happened and how do you think about it now? Or what's a trait you have and how have you changed? So sometimes there's a way to talk about how your experiences or behaviors or reactions or understandings have changed over time. Another thing they often are looking for is why you need this scholarship. So what's nice to think about, it can feel uncomfortable to say, I need this thing, I need this thing. But the reason they want to know why you need it is that committees are looking to find people they can best serve. The people who have money to give away, they're eager to find the people that need it the most. So they need you to say out loud, I need it the most. I need it because of this thing. So it can, although it isn't a thing we do, we don't often do that in daily conversation. We don't just say like, I need you to give me this money because we just don't actually talk that way. So, but it's important to say that in an essay like this, because that's what the person really wants to know. They want to know, can I give it to you and will it be of use? Can you make good use of it? I want my money to go to you if you can make good use of it. And so I want to know, can I give it to you and why? So it's nice to think of it as like explaining to someone why you would be a good recipient for their funds. Okay, so this is going to sound very much like a teacher saying, make sure you review the assignment before you turn it in. Studying the prompt can be, prompts are often not terribly long, but sometimes we overthink them and then we forget what the actual prompt was. So we start writing an essay and here's a prompt and we start here and we're heading toward the prompt and then we just start writing this other thing that is really interesting and we land over here. It's very common in writing, but you want to catch it before you actually turn that in. So the reason is that there's sort of a mystery that we can figure out some important things from the prompt. So it always is going to give us the goal we're working toward. It tells us the most information about what the organization is interested in knowing from us. We can always break it down into pieces, which we're going to practice doing in some later slides. And every now and then the prompts are really vague. So we'll talk about how to not panic when something is really vague. It also may help you to know that in college, a lot of writing prompts are very vague. So any effort you put into sorting out how to respond to a vague prompt is just time you've invested that will pay off once you're in college classes, because you'll find yourself doing the same thing again. Okay. So let's do a sample prompt. So here's a question, and then we're going to talk about how to break it down a little. The GRIS Biology Super Scholars Program prides itself on diversifying the field of wildlife biology. What experiences have you had that helped you understand the importance of diversity in the classroom, field, and lab? How do you hope to support this diversity in your future work? So the first thing it's asking about is your experience in diversity in classroom, field, and lab. So it can be easy to look at this and say, I don't know, what do they mean by diversity? I'm not sure, do I count as diversity? What do they mean by diversity? It's not really defined. And that's a fair question, but at the core, for starting working on this essay is to ask yourself, what experiences do I have in the classroom, the field, and the lab? If I have experience in one, then I'm going to focus on one. If I have two, I'm just going to try to make a list of like, what are just my concrete experiences? And then maybe another way to think about diversity is uniqueness. What is unique about my experience? What could I share that made it different? Or specific to me. So we don't have to work hard to sound different. We just have to be specific to ourselves, because ourselves are always different and specific. If we write about our own experiences, we're already being specific. We don't have to try really hard to prove that we're different. We just have to share our own experiences because it will be different than anybody else's. It's hard to believe that sometimes. Because it's easy to think that everybody has the same experience as we have. But it's not true. Even if you knew everyone in your class who all went to work at one fishery for the day, your experience at the fishery, you yourself, is different than the 19 other people. So you just need to share what it meant to you to go to a fishery. I always like to joke when my kids were small, there was a field trip they took to walk up the M. From their grade school. And my daughter was over the moon every year. She was just had stories and stories and stories about it. And my son, the first time he went, he was so excited because his sister had loved it so much. And I said, how was your field trip to the M? And he was like, we walked up a hill and made observations about nature. So his experience, he would probably not use for a scholarship essay. He wasn't moved by it in any way. My daughter could have talked about it for 35 minutes, after coming home. So it matters what your experience was in there. Secondly, how are you going to carry this value forward into this field? So if this is a field you love, what can you bring forward from that? What do you want more of? So sometimes these future questions can be hard to think about. It can be easy for us to spiral out about it. But a nice way to bring it into something specific is to say, what's something I think we should have more of? What do I want more of? I want more field experience and less classroom experience, or I want more field experiences to be available to high schoolers or to be available to college students, or I want more lab experiences to be available that are paid. That's what I would like to, so thinking about, here's how I could help address this in the future. All right, so we have then a more general. So this one is very specific. This is one of our examples where it's pretty specific to begin. The prompt itself is giving you directions about what to write about. But then we get to this one, which is very wide open. It's the panicky wide open one. What makes you the ideal candidate for the Bobby R. Robertson Scholarship? Breakdown. There is not a lot of information. So in this moment, then you get to do a little bit of digging around and like, what is the organization then? What is the Bobby B. Robertson Scholarship? Do they have a mission statement you can find? If you search mission statement, that's often a place where organizations will tell you what they care the most about, what they aim to do. And then you can start to say, are you a good match? What do they do? What do they care about? Do you care about that? Do your experiences show that you care about that? And can you find any information about past winners? And have they been, what can you learn about them? What were they studying? Were there particular fields they were interested in? Were there specific demographic things that made someone qualified? Was it just for first generation college students, for example? So there are a lot of different kinds of parameters that can show up outside the prompt. So sometimes we just have to expand how we're looking at it a little bit. Another thing that you often see in these is a word count. And everyone will bring their own experiences from high school with familiarity with word count. Some teachers use word count. Some teachers use page numbers. So sometimes it can look really strange if it's the first time seeing a word count and not knowing what that means. And so first I will say, some people are really familiar with character counts from social media and Twitter, a lot of times it's character count, not word count. So it's different. Words are whole words. So you can have supercalifragilisticexpialidocious and it's one word. It's a lot of characters, but it's only one word. So when you see one that says it's 1 to 300 words, that's one double space page or less. So you can sort of visualize I have this much room. And that means every word that you have in there counts. 300 to 500 words is about 2 double space pages, and 500 or more words, there's a lot more room to go. The shorter the essay, the more important it is to get feedback on the words you chose. And if you have some short essays to write, my best advice is to not try to write it at that length in your first draft. To just try to write an essay first and then see how long it is, and then try to see if you can shrink it down a little bit. If you start trying to write 100 words, then you end up with like 25. And then it feels impossible to stretch 25 words, but it's not too bad to go from 350 to 280. We do a lot of that at the Writing Center, shrinking things down to fit from large impermeable drafts. So the most important thing is that you allow the writing process to let you say something important, to write until you have said something that you feel pretty good about. You feel like you said something about yourself. You feel like you said something about how you connect with the scholarship, and then starting to look at the word count. But it is nice to know it at the beginning, to kind of hold out there in the side of your head. I know that sounds inefficient. It sounds like it's less efficient to just write a longer draft and trim it down when you could just aim for the smaller draft. But I will emphasize writing the longer draft first, because the way our brains work, they can only focus on one thing. And if you're super, super focused on word count, it can't actually focus on writing the essay. So it is more efficient to just work on the essay and then think about word count, because your brain just can't do both things at one time. It can, just not very well or very comfortably. It is hard. It makes it harder on your brain. So if you want to have an easier process, just try to see how long you go. You may find that you just land in that length range anyway. The other little part is to look at the word count divided by the parts of the prompt. So if we go back, there's only one part of this prompt, right? We just have, why are you the ideal candidate? This one has 2 though. It wants to know about your experiences and how you want to support it. So if we had 500 words for this, we would want 250 for each. Some prompts have 3 parts. We want to make sure we're carefully addressing each part and not really accidentally ignoring it by being like, oh, I ran out of time, so I just hope to support diversity in the future. Definitely, I have read essays like that. But ideally, you leave room to address that as well. Okay. Now, my favorite part. I have to tell you that it actually took some searching to find a star with 4 points instead of 5, since there are only 4 elements of this star method, but it's such a pretty star. All right, so the star method. The thing I like about this is that it gives us a formula for writing about ourselves. When someone tells you you need to write an essay that includes information about yourselves, it is so hard to decide how much information is too much, how much is too little. I don't know what to say about myself. Do I have to write something really personal? Do I have to tell somebody how I was feeling? It's just really hard to figure out what we're supposed to write about. And the STAR method gives you some guidance. So if you think about a situation you might want to write about, I talked about fisheries, like going to a fishery with a class. So this suggests that there are four ways to talk about a given situation. One is a situation. What was going on? What was the context? What can you say about what happened at the fishery when you went on this field trip for school? The task is what was being asked of you personally. So this could be the whole group, or it could be just you as an individual were asked to do this particular thing. Action, what did you do in response to being asked? Or maybe you weren't asked, maybe you just did this thing. And then results, what happened because of you, or what happened because of the actions you took, or because of what happened because of your response to the task. All right, so we're going to look at a couple of examples of this, but this is a very nice way to think about how to get enough information, how to get the right kind of information for presenting a personal experience. Okay, so here are two different versions of the same. Oh, and maybe I was thinking of the fisheries because I was remembering in my brain that this one talks about working at a catfish farm. Apparently, we're just going to talk about fish tonight. All right. So one version, I spent one summer working on a catfish farm. I worked on the stocking team. I invented a new way of checking the water. My boss was really happy and I had a good time. Automatically, this is a great example. This sounds like something we would want to hear about, but the version that is following this method, so if we go to the situation, this expands to one summer catfish farm in Northeast Arkansas hired me as part of their stocking team. What was the task? I worked with 2 other students to feed and care for the fish, which was challenging work because the ponds were enormous and it stays very hot all summer long. The fish can fall ill and the farm depended on very slim margins to make money. So then what was I asked to do? I worked with the lead farmer, Jeff Farmington, to develop a new way to measure water temperatures. Then what happened as a result of what you did? We kept hundreds more fish alive than usual that summer, and I discovered how much I love caring for animals in unusual settings. So you can also see that this is longer. So sometimes we need to find an in-between, but this is a great example when we're not thinking about word count. This is a great example of following the STAR method because it helps you figure out which details you might want to include. Okay. So thinking about for yourself what you might want to what kinds of situations you might want to think about. So I would suggest on a sheet of paper, something handwritten, something that feels non-committal. So not something you're typing like it's going to be a draft, but just starting to think like, what experiences have I had that have taught me something? And those can be big, heavy experiences, but they don't need to be. So sometimes people feel like they need that, like, and sometimes we really do want to share big experiences. So when I was in middle school, for example, I spent a year of middle school, my dad was sick. And at the beginning of 8th grade, my dad died. When I was applying to colleges, every person I worked with suggested that I should write about what it was like to spend a year in and out of a hospital and having my dad die. And I was like, but I don't have anything to say about that. It was terrible. I don't know what I learned from it. I know now, and I can see why people were advising that for me, but that didn't feel like something I had anything to say about. I wanted to write about working on a political campaign that I worked on, which, by the way, I didn't choose to work on. I was forced to for a class, but then I loved. That's how good education works. It forced us to do things that we didn't know we would like, but it turns out we liked. All right, so thinking about what we've learned, what situations have you been in that might highlight things about you that you want the audience to know? So one way to begin thinking about it is from thinking of situations, but another is to start by thinking like, what do I want someone to know about me? What do I like if I'm a creative problem solver, or I'm really dogged about figuring out how to solve, how to fix something, or if I'm really can tolerate repetition and learn things through repetition. What situation could I share that would let me tell that would let me say, like, I only got good grades because I rewrote everything 55 times. What could I say that would tell that story? So sometimes it's a little easier to say, I want to say this about myself. What's a story I could tell? And some people can say, no, this situation, I learned something. And what is that something? Okay. What was expected of you in that situation? What did you actually and specifically do? Pardon me. Okay. I apologize. I was getting a flurry of massive texts from both of my children all at one time, but it appears everything is fine. Okay. So this question, what did you actually and specifically do? one of the things we're getting at with this is describing actions that someone else would have seen if they were watching you in that situation. So it's nice to say things like, I really loved, I really loved working on the political campaign because it was really exciting and it was very busy and fun and loud and full of excitement. That is nice, but what is more informative to hear is what someone else would have seen. And what someone else would have seen was me sitting at a desk, organizing piles and piles and piles of printouts and putting sticky notes on them so that the person who was trying to read the research would be able to find them. They would be organized. And so the work I was actually doing wasn't being, I mean, I was enthralled by the situation, but the work I was doing was pretty boring and not that interesting, but I did it really well, even though it wasn't miraculous or exciting, but it mattered because it was the end of a campaign and nobody had any time for anything. And I felt good because I felt helpful. I felt like I was really helping people that didn't have enough time to sort something out. So the work wasn't life-changing. I do still file a lot of papers, I will say, but that did not become a career interest. What I learned about myself is I was really good at helping people when they needed help, in very specific ways, not just globally, but like, okay, I can organize this gigantic file of things and tell you how to make sense of it. So that's something someone outside of me would have been able to observe happening. So that's a good way to say, like, what was I physically doing in that situation? How were you or the people around you changed by what you did? What did you learn from taking this action? So was the impact? What that question is really asking is, how is your behavior connected to other people or a community or a project or a team of some kind, you know? The details help. The closer we are to you, the better. And what that really means is that if you remember that your audience is somebody who doesn't know you at all, they're just learning about you, what you're saying in your essay. So you want them, you want to give somebody something to see. What can they see you doing or saying or completing, like even if it's building elaborate timelines to be able to orchestrate work schedules in school, what does that actually physically look like? These are some of the details that I know we work a lot with in tutoring sessions, with really ironing out, figuring out which details are in your brain and which are on the paper. That can be hard to sort out because when we're describing our own experience, we forget to put important things on the paper. All right, so here is a UM specific prompt. If you're applying to scholarship, this was handed over to me, but I think this is the most updated. Are you familiar, Andrea?
I think it's kind of very similar to what the UM General portal is asking for them. I don't know.
2020. It's last year's general UM portal prompt.
Okay.
So it's not this year's, but it gives them an idea of what's
the same
there.
Okay, awesome. All right, in an essay of 300 to 500 words, so we're at like 2 to 3 pages, describe an experience where you were unsuccessful in achieving your goal. What lessons did you learn from this experience and how did they support your academic and or professional aspirations? So here, there are 2 ways to start with this. Thinking of the unsuccessful experience or thinking about your aspirations. So whichever one feels the most interesting to you, start there. There's no wrong place to start an essay. It's best to just start at the thing that seems the most interesting. So if you want to talk about your aspirations, you're like, I know where I'm headed. What got me there? Or you can say, well, I can definitely think of a very unsuccessful experience, and it was this. And then your challenge is to think, but what did I learn from it and how is it gearing me toward? So it may be, most of us, if we're really honest, have a variety of unsuccessful experiences that we could share. And it may be that, although that doesn't sound like the most fun mental errand, but to be like, here are a couple. Are there any that I absolutely don't want to write about? Because you are not compelled to write about anything if you don't want to write about it. So we may be unsuccessful, but it was it was painful. You don't want to write an essay about it. But there are some things that are unsuccessful that you might be comfortable writing about, right? Like, I know often with sports, there are a lot of things, or band, music, jobs. There are all kinds of experiences we have where we just don't feel like we did what we could have, or it didn't turn out the way we hoped. All right, the lesson is the bridge. The lesson is the important part. So the challenge here is to find an experience and a lesson, something that's what ties it together. You had an experience, you learned something, and now you have these aspirations. So it may take thinking of a couple experiences and a couple aspirations when you find the right one to think about, like, what have I learned? This last one, it says it doesn't have to be organic. We're trying to tell a brief, compelling story that builds a bridge between a past event and the future. So what this means when we say it doesn't have to be organic, it just means your audience doesn't need to know every single detail of the story, because it's easy then for 500 words to get taken up with telling the story. And then you don't have any room to say what you learned from it or what you want to do about it. So you want to maybe write a long draft and then see if you can get that story to come down. This is one of those times where sometimes people are like, yeah, but if my hunting buddy saw that essay, they would know that, like, some of those things were not true. But your hunting buddy, you can say a true thing without including all the details. Like, maybe you leave your hunting buddy out of the story. His feelings won't be hurt because he probably won't see this essay. And so it is like trying to pick and choose which details we can leave out. We always want to be honest, but there are a lot of ways to be honest. And sometimes stories can be told in a shorter version and a longer version if we're trying to illustrate that we learned something from it. Okay. So here are two versions. Let's look at, I tried to get a good grade in my chemistry class, but I couldn't. I got a low C, even though I liked the class. I want to have a career as a pharmacist, but now I know I need to try really hard if I'm going to make that happen. So we have both of the things. We have the unsuccessful experience. We have the lesson, and we have the aspiration. So it has all the pieces. But we don't understand, it's hard to see or understand who this student is really. We don't have very much experience. This could apply to actually a lot of students. So what we're trying to show a reader is, I'm not all the students, I'm just me. I'm exactly my own experience. So what this other version does is let's look at how much other information we learn about this student with these details. In 11th grade, I opted to switch from regular chemistry to honors chemistry because I'm passionate about science and thought I wanted to study pharmacology in college. So remember also our STAR method. So this is the situation. The class was much more difficult than I anticipated, and my grades slipped quickly. It's the situation. My response, by the end of the semester, I was only able to salvage a C. However, what did I do? Toward the end of the semester, however, I was able to attend several study sessions led by my teacher, who showed me new ways of thinking about what is that word? Stoichiometry, and other difficult chemistry concepts. See, you can't say it out loud. So this is a savvy sentence though. Why? Because it includes the language of the field the student wants to go into, right? This is speaking directly to, this is saying, I didn't get a good grade in that chemistry class, but now I can write about chemistry and I know what these big words are and I can put them in there. They're from the field. So this is the action I took, right? I went and did this thing. Thanks to study skills I learned from that teacher, I'm carrying an A in my current science class, and I'm still passionate about science. So this is the response, what happened because of my actions. I want to take classes in both chemistry and biology departments when I get to UM, and I can't wait to keep building my skill set. So this is the piece about the aspirations. So this is using the STAR method within this prompt. So it can appear in various ways. Need-based prompts are a little bit different. Many of the strategies we've already explored still apply. Keep an eye on the word count. The word count does matter. It's pretty hard and fast. I would not advise going under or over. if you can really help it. Break down the prompt, just like we've been doing. Acknowledge that these are hard. It is strange. In this case, it can be extra difficult to explain why you need money. But if you just think maybe about what I was saying before, that we often think of it as asking for money, but you're asking someone who's eager to give money away. So you're not asking someone who doesn't have it. A lot of times for those of us who don't have money and need it, we're surrounded by people who also don't have money. So it's really, really uncomfortable to ask for it. But what you're doing in a scholarship essay is actually asking someone who has it to give. They want to give it away. So it's different. It's a different way to think about it, and hopefully feels a little bit more freeing. It's somebody who has enough that they're wanting to give it to you. Essentially, the gist of these say, how does this money get you from point A to point B? In other words, how does it solve a current money problem for you and set you up for success? So those are two of the pivotal parts of these need-based essay prompts. All right, so for example, describe your current financial need as a candidate for the Monty B. Grizz Scholarship Fund, 500 words. So break down, what are some concrete hangups for you right now financially? What have you already taken care of? So it's nice to think about, like, just logistically, what do I actually not have money for? Like, this is really like laying it out. That is actually what it's asking. What have you taken care of? So what is already covered and what isn't? What is the Monty B. Grizz money used for specifically? Meaning, does it say that, does it specify what you can use it for? Sometimes scholarships do say this is only for books, it's only for tuition. Sometimes it's open. So it's nice to search for some of that information. So we have finally one last version. My family is on hard times right now and would be so grateful to be the recipient of the Monty B. Grizz Scholarship. I would use the money well as a student and get good grades, as well as caring for my community by becoming a veterinarian. Okay, so here we have a lot of additional details that are adding concrete details to the story. My mother supports myself and 3 siblings on a single income of less than $50,000 per year with limited state assistance. I've been admitted to the veterinarian training program at the University of Montana and have secured my tuition through loans and grants, but have no money left over with which to purchase course materials. Receiving a $1,000 scholarship from the Monty B. Grizz Scholarship would allow me to purchase textbooks and lab materials for my first several semesters and would prevent me from going further in debt as I begin my program. Thank you for your consideration. So it remains very specific, both about the situation and about something the money would be used for. It's nice to know when you write it down that you are also not making a promise. So if you got this scholarship, some do require you to spend it on something specific, but something that holds students up often is they're worried to say what they'll do in the future in case they're sort of making a promise about it. It feels like you're making a contract, like I promise I'll do this thing, but often, not necessarily with this prompt, but often where something says, what do you want to do in the future? You're sort of dreaming about what you want to do in the future, or you're hopeful. I would want to spend the money on textbooks and lab materials. This is my plan, but your plan doesn't, if it makes you nervous to write that, just know, yeah, if you had that money, you might have to use it for something else. But that isn't what they're asking. They want to know, in your best case scenario, what do you want to do with it? All right. Okay. So, strategies for moving forward and thinking about how to position yourself really well for these drafts. Build up a star bank. So thinking about what are some experiences that feel like they'd be kind of fruitful, and can you just practice seeing if you can come up with some of those details. Drafts are your friends, meaning don't try to write one draft and have it be enough. Just plan to write some rough outlines. Plan to have things be in rough form before they're really, really set. Find 2 proofreaders and editors, like just find people. This is why we like to do this at the Writing Center, because I'm going to show you here in a second how to make an appointment with us. I would also add in here, leaving time to just be patient with yourself. We know for sure now from research that most people don't procrastinate because they're lazy. Most people procrastinate because they really, really care about the outcome of what they're doing. So leave time for yourself to have some patience with yourself with what you're doing with these projects. It's big work. So it doesn't work very well if you're like, I have 2 hours, I will do it and it will be complete. It just does. It turns out you might get an awesome draft and that's great, but you just might need a little bit more feedback. Okay, so I'm going to stop. I'm just going to escape from this and I'm going to move over here and I'm going to show you where to find the Writing Center login page, and I'm going to show you how to make an appointment. So I always go from just the main landing page because our Writing Center has actually a long website. So I just type in Writing Center. And we're the Writing and Public Speaking Center. So that's us. You'll arrive at this page. Person gloriously doing his homework up on the M, which looks amazing. When you scroll down, you'll see how to make an appointment. It wants you to log in. And in order to log in, it wants you to create an account. So when you see this, you should know the Writing Center works with community members, high school students. We work with a lot of different people. So you'll see things in here like it says your student ID or school name. You could just welcome to put your high school name. You're standing in college. You can just pick one. We don't actually look at this. It's just required to select one. You can answer these. It will want to know, do you want us to text remind you for appointments or not? If so, you can give us your phone number and then you'll get, you'll get a text. So this is just to create an account for yourself. Once you have an account, let's see, I will put mine in and show you how it works. Okay. So once we log in, you see this screen here, which is looks very messy when you first look at it. It actually looks messy because it's super full right now because we're at the end of the semester. But I want to point a couple things out to you. First of all, we have this column over here where we have all the different tutors' names that are working, and then you can see where they're working. So you'll notice that everybody has online, which means right now we have some face-to-face appointments.
Alexa, connect to iPhone.
We can meet with you face-to-face, but everybody's available. Maybe we can mute. Everybody's available online, so you can do it through Zoom. So what you want to look for is a white box. So on Monday, there are, like, here's an appointment at 12:30. If I click on it and say, I want to come to a Zoom appointment at that time, what I want to show you is it asks for like course information. If you don't have it and you just want to write scholarship essay, it doesn't actually care what you put in that box. It just wants you to put something. So don't be shy or word it off. You can just write scholarship essay. It lets you specify whether you would like, why is it freezing? In person or online. And then you can look at, you might want to do all these things where you can just click, I don't know yet. And then you can upload a draft or not upload a draft. If you upload a draft, most tutors don't look at it until right when you're talking about it anyway. So there's no pressure to do that. You can, and you could show up, you could make an appointment and show up and say, I have no draft. I have nothing, but I would like to write this essay. And I would argue that if you have something due and you have no draft, it's actually the better time to come because you can just get a ton of work done sitting with somebody talking you through it and reminding you of the various parts of it and jotting some notes down, and kind of helps you get outside your head to just think of it as a project you have to get done. You know, not a big deal. It's just a thing you're gonna work on and turn in. All right, so I believe that brings me just about to the end of my thoughts and ideas about working on scholarship essays and how to make an appointment. If you are interested right now, if you went in the schedule, you would see that we don't have much next week because classes end. And right now our January schedule isn't up, but it will be soon. And those appointments are primarily with the directors of the writing program, mostly work in January. And so those 3 or 4 of us especially have a lot of experience working with scholarship essays, but we are open 10 in the morning to 7 at night, 6 days a week. So it's easy to find us, find somebody to work on your essay with.